Inside of our project, go ahead to DTOs, and here we got that new passenger DTO, and we will now create a new one. So right click on it, add a new C# class, simply select the class here, and let's call it book DTO. There we go. And now we will for sure make this a record again. So public record, remove the curly braces, instead take default parameter ones or constructor ones or whatever. Public record, and we got a GUID here, flight ID. Next up we got string passenger email and byte number of seats. So these are the informations that we really need, right? So which passenger wants to book which flight, how many seats in that flight. So those are the informations we want to receive when we are talking about bookings. Why are we using a byte here? So actually we can use a value up to 255, and number of seats will probably be below that. So if we have like 300 seats, I want to book 300 seats, then it wouldn't work because byte doesn't have that range. But that's very, very uncommon, right? So it's more like I want to book 1 seat or 3 seats or maybe 5 or 7 or 8, but not something like over 255. Great. So always keep in mind that when you're working in web development, you want to have the smallest amounts of data to be transferred between the endpoints to make it really fast. So there for sure is a difference if you're sending like 100 kilobyte or 10 kilobyte or 1 megabyte, right? There's a huge difference between the speeds. So just try to send over some huge images. Just imagine a website which has non-optimized images on the page. So you have a JPEG which has like 20 MB in size, and then go ahead and try to load it. You will have to wait, depending on your internet speed, a couple of seconds. And when you're on mobile, you maybe even have to wait a minute, right? So just to get that page loading. So always keep in mind in web development, try to optimize for byte size. Great. Now we got our book DTO ready. Open up the controllers and head over to the flight controller. Now, first of all, let's add a using directive, DTO, for sure flights.dtos. There we go. And then scroll down so that we can create a new endpoint. So I'm here right below the find action result. And now we're creating a new one, which is book for sure. So here we're talking about HTTP post because we are sending in the information of who wants to book a flight, how often, and we will create something, right? So if someone wants to book a flight, we will create that record of that information on the server. So we create something, so we use HTTP post. Let's call it public void book, and for sure it's taken a book DTO, right? Remember, DTOs are data transfer objects. So those informations which get sent over the internet or over the connection. All right, now let's add some write line here. System.diagnostics.debug.writeLine. And we want to write down the information, booking a new flight. And now let's simply add the DTO.flight ID so that we know which flight is getting booked right now. Booking a new flight, DTO flight ID. All right, so that's great, that's working. And now for sure, we want to store the information, right? So if we hit that endpoint here, we for sure need to save it anywhere. So scroll to the very top, and here where we got our flight array, right? It's a static array. We go ahead and do nearly the same. Static private iList of data type book DTO. Let's call it bookings equals to new list of book DTO. There we go. So we have a new static list, static again, to make it available during the entire runtime. If we don't do that, it will only be available for a single request. So you would never get more information about previous bookings. You would only have your current information. So make it static definitely. And now we can go ahead inside of our book endpoint that we have just created. Yeah, and then add this DTO to that list. So bookings dot add, let's add that DTO. So now let's start our application using debugging mode to see that console log. So hit run to start the debugger, and then go to our Swagger UI. And here you can now see our new post endpoint, right? Don't forget that the name of the method in C# is completely unrelated. It's only the name is only driven by the attribute, and since we haven't provided any information, only HTTP post attribute, it will take the name from the flight controller and create the post endpoint with exactly the same name. So open it up. You can see the example value here. That's fine. Click on try it out. Let's leave everything as it is. Go to number of seats, add 5 for example, hit execute. You should now see a 200 response code. And when you go to your application and take a look at the output, you should be able to see booking a new flight with that ID. So our endpoint is for sure working and the DTO got added to the bookings list. Nice. Okay, now we can switch over to Angular again and regenerate the client API and then finally connect both together so that we can post from Angular into our RESTful API.